Hello, I just want to come on and tell you I got a news flash for you. That news flash, this is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. No one can make a day but the Lord. And He has made this day, and He made it for you, and He made it for me. He made the day for us and us for this day. So we're going to rejoice and be glad in it. We're going to continue with the series for July, Homecoming. Homecoming. And our lesson today is I'm coming home. And again, after studying this lesson, students will once again understand that it does not matter how far you stray from home, you can go home. How? Making the choice to go home. That's all you have to do. It's same as the prodigal son said last week when he came to his senses. He said, in my father's house, the servants are better off than me. I will arise and go home. So, and this is as we prepare for re-entry into the church building on July the 18th. This is what we need to let folks know, that they can come back to the church building. They can come home. So let's look at our lesson for today. I'm coming home. It's from the book of Ruth. And the first thing we need to understand, what time is it? It's a time when the judges ruled. Ruth 1 and verse 1a says, now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled. So that lets us know right there what time it is. Judges 17 and 6 says, in those days there was no king in Israel, but, you got to watch the buts. But every man did that which was right in his own eyes, not in God's eyes, but in his own eyes. Judges 21:25 says the same thing. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. What time is it? It was a time of evil days. My sisters and brothers, I declare unto you, it sounds like that Ruth, a book, our Judges, is written for today, and it is, because it certainly has gotten us. It's a time of evil days, days of sinfulness. Judges 2:11 says, the Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight and served the images of Baal. We may not have a stone statue or a God that we bow down to, but we bow down to positions. We worship at the altar of power. We worship at the altar of people. We bow down to images that God does not want us to bow down to. What time is it? It's evil days. It's days of servitude. Judges 2:14 says, and so the Lord became furious. See, after a while, God will say, enough is enough. And we need to understand that we are getting close to the edge when God says enough is enough. And so the Lord became furious and let raiders attack and rob them. Rob who? Rob the children of Israel. He let the enemies all around overpower them. And the Israelites could no longer protect themselves. My God, my God. It's the days of sorrow. Every time they would go into battle, I'm reading Judges 2:15. Every time they would go into battle, the Lord was against them, just as he had said he would be. Because he told them, if you get into the land and you forget me, I'm going to do you harm. And so now they were in great distress. It's a day of scarcity. So Judges 6:6. So Israel was reduced to starvation by the Mennonites. Then the Israelites cried out to the Lord for help. Look how long. See, there's a vicious cycle that goes on in Judges. Because they have no king, everybody's doing whatever they think they want to do. And so there's sin, then there's servitude, then there's sorrow, scarcity, and then salvation. So they cry out to the Lord for help. It was scarcity. Because Ruth 1:1 again tells us, in the days when the judges ruled in Israel, a severe famine came upon the land. It's a day of shamefulness. Now you talking about today. This is it. Families, society, and the nation were gripped by a sinful, evil spirit of lying, stealing, and cheating, selfishness, greed, covetousness, that's even going on within the church. False religion, religious deception, unbelief, idolatry, false worship, extreme prejudice and discrimination, national division, disgrace and civil war, deception and the terrible abuse of human rights by national leaders. Now, didn't I tell you that sound like today? I declare unto you, it sounds exactly like today. Now, let us look a little close at this. I mean, when we look at today and everything that go on around us, we cannot help but think, whew, this life is rough. It hurts. Life hurts. And there's nothing profound about that statement. Anyone can see the pain, the suffering that surrounds us. A 5-year-old dies from an unintentional gunshot wound. A mother develops cancer. A father of 5 loses his job. We have COVID-19. It came into our lives and caused us to experience isolation, social distancing, hibernation, desperation, all of any other rations that you can think of. So the existence of evil and suffering in the world can keep us from trusting God. You say, how's that? Because we again begin to ask the question, why would an all-powerful God allow so much pain and suffering in the world? You know, when I was growing up, the first prayer I learned that was, God is great and God is good. And now we get to the point where we wonder, is God great? If he's great, why does he allow this? Is God good? If he's good, why does he allow all that we're going through? Allows such a pandemic like COVID-19 to come upon us. Why? And it's a fair question. I ask you this question before we get into the focal passage. As you go down the street, as you drive down the street, and you pass people, have you ever noticed people? Or do you just driving on, not paying any attention? Many people, I want you to pay attention to this. Many people have a look of hopelessness bewilderedness. Some even look punch drunk, like I can't take another punch. Life has dealt them a terrible blow, and they can't seem to make sense out of it or get their legs steady up under them. They seem desperate. They seem hope is gone out of their eyes. And as we read the first chapter of the book of Ruth, try to put yourself in Naomi's place. The lessons coming from the book of Ruth, but we really going to look closely at Naomi, because Naomi is the original Desperate Housewife. You remember when they used to come on television, Desperate Housewife? Well, Naomi is she's the original Desperate Housewife. And desperate means having lost hope, moved by despair, involving or imploring extreme measures in an attempt to escape defeat or frustration. And this is what we see, is the first thing that we will see that happens in the book of Ruth. And this is certainly Naomi's situation. In fact, she declares her name is not Naomi, which means pleasant, but Mara, which means better. But the question is, how did she get in this situation? Come on, girlfriend, how did you get to be in a situation where you feel like you're so desperate? Everything is hopeless. So before we look ahead to the homecoming, let us look back to see how she got in this predicament. And remember, I said this lesson is more about Naomi than about Ruth, because Naomi is the one who can say, I'm coming home. Home in Bethlehem, Judah is not Ruth's home. It's Naomi's home. So I want you to keep in mind that I will constantly be mentioning Naomi and not Ruth, but it comes from the book of Ruth. Now, the first thing that we see is that Elimelech, that's the husband of Naomi, and interesting, because we talked about this several weeks ago, that names mean something. His name meant God is my king, or the king is my God. Well, the king is my God, Elimelech, decides to leave Bethlehem, Judah, and go to Moab. Now, who or what is Moab? Well, I'm not going to read it all to you, but yeah, I will. Genesis 19, start in verse 30, go down to 38. Afterward, Lot left Zorah because he was afraid of the people there. Now, see, first of all, you got to go back and read Genesis 19 in its entirety. I'm telling you, if you read Genesis 19, you'll stop all this looking at, what is that, Young and the Restless, Bold and the Beautiful, and all that stuff that you look at. I can't think of Housewives of Atlanta or whatever that stuff is called. But anyway, because Genesis chapter 19 is I ain't never seen anything like it. But anyway, because you see, he's afraid of the people at Zorah because he was living in Sodom and Gomorrah. You remember Abraham? You got to go back. You got to study your word. When he and Abraham, their fortune materialized so until the land wasn't able to keep them, and their servants were clashing with each other. So Abraham said, look here, Lot. And Lot remembers his nephew. He said, what we need to do is we need to separate. whichever direction you go in, I'm going to let you choose. You can go right, I'll go left. If you go left, I'll go right. Well, Lot looked out there and he saw what he thought was the best land, and so he took the best land. And that put him at Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, at this point in Genesis 19, the angels come and tell him, you need to get up out of here because we're getting ready to destroy this city. And so he went to Zorah, but now he's afraid of the people there, and he went to live in a cave in the mountains. I'm reading again. With his two daughters, he left. Now remember, when he left Sodom and Gomorrah, his sons-in-law, who was married to his daughters, they didn't want to leave. And Miss Lot, she was turned to a pillar of salt because she looked back and obviously didn't want to leave either. So one day, now let's look back, verse 31. One day, the older daughter said to her sister, there are no men left anywhere in this entire area, so we can't get married like everyone else. And our father will soon be too old to have children. Come, let us get him drunk with wine, and then we will have sex with him. That way, we will preserve our family line through our father. I mean, did you catch that? Woo, that's rough. So that night, they got him drunk. They got Lot drunk with wine. And the older daughter went in and had intercourse with her father. He was unaware of her lying down or getting up again. The next morning, the oldest daughter said to the younger sister, I had sex with our father last night. Let's get him drunk again with wine tonight. And you go in and have sex with him. That way we will preserve our family line through our father. So that night, they got him drunk with wine again. I don't know how much wine can you drink? A lot? That you get drunk one night and you go back and get drunk the next night? Woo! And the younger daughter went in and had intercourse with him. As before, he was unaware of her lying down or getting up again. As a result, both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their own father. My Lord. When the older daughter gave birth to a son, she named him Moab. He became the ancestor of the nation known as the Moabites. See, that's where the Moabites come from. When the younger daughter gave birth to a son, she named him Benamite. He became the ancestor of the nation now known as the Ammonites. And you need to understand, these folks are kin to the Israelites. They cousins. They cousins. But they don't act like it in the scripture. Now, so let's get back to, now we know who the Moabs are. Elimelech's decision to go to live in Moab will have a great ripple effect. Why? Because Elimelech dies. And we need, let me just stop and say this. You need to catch this, catch this, catch this. We need to remember that the decision we make today, the consequences will show up in our lives tomorrow. Woo, that was good. I can drop the mic and go home now. You remember that. The decisions you make today, this day, the consequences will show up in our lives tomorrow. Now, another point. Mahlon and Chilion, sons of Naomi and Elimelech. All we know about these two men, other than the names of their parents and wives, is what their names mean. Their names mean sickly or unhealthy. That's Mahlon. Chilion was weak or puny. So they both married Moabite women. And this is a violation of what God had commanded. They both died. And now Naomi has two daughters-in-law left. And check Deuteronomy 7, verses 3 and 4. And you will, well, here it is. What is more? You shall not intermarry with them. This is God speaking. You shall not give your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons, for they will turn your sons away from me, from following me to serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord will be inflamed against you. Excuse me. And he will quickly destroy you. So God had said even before they got in there, excuse me again, whoo, my allergies are acting up. He will quickly destroy you. So God told them in advance, don't do it. Now, we see what Elimelech's name meant, Mahlon and Chilion. Now, Bethlehem, Judah, where they previously lived. We're doing a lot of background so that you can get an understanding. They lived in Bethlehem, Judah. Beth means house and Lahem means bread. Therefore, Bethlehem means house of bread. Judah means praise, our house of praise. Moab, you remember I told you that's where they went. And the Moabites are descendants from Lot, which means they are cousins with the Israelites. The name Moab means what father? Who is your daddy? I tell you, the Bible got says who is your daddy? Well, no. So there was a famine in the land. And now, let's see, a famine can be a checkup on our faith. In other words, how will we react when a famine comes? There you see, in Genesis 12:10, when a famine came, Abram went down to Egypt to live there because the famine was great and was severe in the land. So he tests our faith. And notice Abram goes down to Egypt. And notice it said down to Egypt because Egypt is symbolic of the world. And to get to Egypt, he had to leave the high place and go down. So it's a chastisement of our failure. Perhaps God, as any parent, will correct their child. And Hebrews 12:6 tells us, the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he punishes everyone he accepts as his child. So, you gave your child a spanking or whipping, took a switch or a belt to him. What makes you think that God won't discipline you? Because Proverbs 3:11 and 12 said, my child, don't reject the Lord's discipline, and don't be upset when he corrects you. For the Lord corrects those he loves, just as a father corrects a child in whom he delights. Now, I know if you were like me, I coming up, I used to think that meant my mama, I didn't get that many whippings, let me say that. But my mama, really, she didn't like me if she would whip me. But it was love to make sure that you would do the right thing. Look at Hebrew 12 and 11. Because it's child rearing for the future. The famine could be seen as child rearing for the future. Hebrew 12:11 says, we do not enjoy being disciplined. I don't know anybody that enjoy getting a whipping. It is painful at the time, but later, after we have learned from it, we have peace because we start living in the right way. And the first time that your mama put that belt to you, you start doing right. So now let's look at our lesson. Ruth chapter 1, verse 1 through 5. Long ago, when the judges ruled Israel, there was a shortage of food in the land. So a man named Elimelech left the town of Bethlehem in Judah to live in the country of Moab with his wife and his 2 sons. His wife was named Naomi, and his 2 sons were named Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. When they came to Moab, they settled there. There's the key. They settled there. Then Naomi's husband, Elimelech, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These sons married women from Moab. One was named Orpah, and the other was named Ruth. Naomi and her sons had lived in Moab about 10 years when Mahlon and Chilion also died. So Naomi was left alone without her husband or her 2 sons. So we can see that she's desperate. Why? Well, let's look at this. First of all, a shortage of bread caused the desperation. They lived in the house of bread and the land of praise, and yet they leave and go to live in Moab. Now, remember, they leave the house of praise, or the house of bread, and praise, and go eat out of a garbage can and drink from a scrub bucket. I mean, who does that? I don't think that I would leave the house of bread, the land of praise, and go try and find me something to eat out of a garbage can and drink from a scrub bucket. But this is likened to what they did. They go back into the world because God says in Psalms 108, verse 9, Moab's a scrub bucket. I mopped the floor with Moab. But here are his people going down to Moab because there's a shortage of bread in the house of bread. Now, the shortage of bread can mean several things. It could be shortage of money, and that's many times what we say, I don't have no bread. Shortage of food, and certainly spiritual hunger. And we see the same thing happen with the prodigal son last week. After he spent everything, that's shortage of money, A time came when there was no food anywhere, shortage of food, and the son was poor and hungry. Not only is he physically hungry, he is spiritually hungry. Naomi is desperate because of being in a strange land. She is desperate because of severe losses. Naomi's husband died. Her 2 sons died. She's desperate because now here she is in Moab and she has no support base. And one thing, we can make it as long as we got a support base. Somebody that can pump us up, somebody that can walk with us, be with us, help us, talk to. But here she is in Moab. Oh, she done lived there for 10 years, yeah. So I'm sure she had a friend across the walk there or something. But there was no support base. Now, let me ask you this. Suppose you have been driving for several hours. When you see a sign that lets you know that you are traveling the wrong way. You have been going wrong for several hours. So here's the question. What will you do? Will you keep going the wrong way, and some of us would do it, in hopes that you will come back to the right road? Well, see, if I keep going, and maybe I'll hook up with the expressway that can take me up. Is that what you're going to do? Or will you just change your destination and decide to go where the road leads you? Or will you turn around? Now, Elimelech had traveled down the wrong road. But here's something that you need to remember. When you travel wrong, everyone with you is going wrong. It's not just about you. You're driving your car, you're going wrong. Everyone in the car with you is going wrong. And so now, what do? You keep going that wrong way? Or you decide your destination will change? Or will you turn around and go the right way? Well, let's look at Naomi. Ruth 1, verse 6 through 9. While Naomi was in Moab, she heard that the Lord had come to help his people and had given them food again. So she and her daughters-in-law got ready to leave Moab and return home. So Naomi is decide she is going to get back on the right road. Naomi and her daughters-in-law left the place where they had lived and started back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back home, each of you, to your own mother's house. May the Lord be as kind to you as you have been to me and my sons, who are now dead. May the Lord give you another happy home and a new husband." When Naomi kissed the women goodbye, they began to cry out loud. We see now Naomi is desperate, but she could return home. Just like the prodigal son, when he came to his senses. I love that part. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father. And so Naomi, she's desperate, but she could return home. She's desperate, but she remained faithful in all of her trials. Desperate, but a woman of great faith who withstood almost unimaginable testing without once ever wavering in her love for God. Now, you perhaps thinking, now, I didn't read that. Maybe you didn't, but you need to read it in the actions of the daughters-in-law. Certainly, there was something about her that drew their attention, that made them want to go with her. She was like faithful, and that's how come to God. And that's how come that Lamentations 3:23, great is thy faithfulness. God is faithful to his people, and we will see that he will be faithful to Naomi. Naomi has been faithful to him, and he is going to be faithful to her. Now let's look down here, Ruth chapter 1, 10 through 19. We continue the conversation. They said to her, no, we want to go with you to your people. But Naomi said, my daughters, return to your own homes. Why do you want to go with me? I cannot give birth to more sons to give you new husbands. Go back, my daughters, to your own homes. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I told myself I still have hope and had another husband tonight, and even if I had more sons, should you wait until they were grown into men? Should you live for so many years without husbands? Don't do that, my daughters. My life is much too sad for you to share, because the Lord has been against me. Now, in the NIV, it says, the Lord's hand has gone out against me. Why? Why would God's hand go out against her? Because I guess you could say because she knew better. But she did what her husband said do. My life is much too sad for you to share, because the Lord has been against me. The women cried together out loud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law Naomi goodbye, but Ruth held on to her tightly. Naomi said to Ruth, look, your sister-in-law is going back to her own people and her own gods. Go back with her. But Ruth said, don't beg me to leave you or to stop following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. And where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. I ask the Lord to punish me terribly if I do not keep this promise. Not even death will separate us. When Naomi saw that Ruth had firmly made up her mind to go with her, she stopped arguing with her. So Naomi and Ruth went on until they came to the town of Bethlehem. When they entered Bethlehem, all the people became very excited. The women of the town said, is this really Naomi? They were happy to see her. Now, let's look at the decisions. Naomi's decision was to return to the promised land. There comes time that we do have to start over, even when we don't feel like starting over. She had no future in Moab. She was not only a widow, but also an alien in a foreign land. And because of that, she should have been more sensitive to the plight of her two daughters-in-law. And many times we want to chase people away instead of drawing them to Christ. We saw that last week when we looked at a new look at the prodigal son. How we church people push people out of the church. Then look at Orpha. Her decision, return to Moab, which is a return to the world. This is a picture of choosing the world over the Lord, starting and stopping. But let me say this to you before we get to Ruth. Some people will start out with you. Listen to me now. Listen to me now. Some people will start out with you, but will not finish or go all the way. You got to catch that in your spirit. Here's another point. Some people are in your life for a season. They're not in your life for the rest of your life. They just in your life for a season. And the third thing I want to say, if someone can walk out of your life, let them. Their life with you is over. Don't beg anyone to stay in your life. Why? Because they are not going where you are going. They don't want what you want. And we see that. Naomi wants to go back to Bethlehem, Judah. Orpha doesn't. She was there for a season. And many times people are in our lives for a season and a reason. And when the reason is over, the season is up. Let them go. Stop begging somebody to stay in your life. They're not going where you're going. They don't want what you want. Now, let's look at Ruth's decision. Ruth demonstrates faith in Naomi's God. She trusted God. We hear about how Abraham left everything, but Ruth does the same thing. She trusted God enough to leave her region, trusted him enough to leave her relatives, trusted him enough to leave her religion, trusted him enough to leave her relationships. But somebody said, you can't beat God giving. So Ruth was willing to give that up for him. God's grace towards Ruth, what she got was a new place for her home. Because she said, where you go, I will go. So she got a new place for her home, a new people for her friends, a new power for her life, and a new prospect for her future. And as we return to the building, not to the church, because we are the church, but as we return to the building, you need to remember some members will be like Naomi. I once heard Bernetta Cosby speak on Naomi, and I love what she did. She changed the name. She went backwards. She said, spelled backwards, Naomi means I mourn. And Naomi did. Some will come back. You will find them still in mourning because perhaps they lost a loved one during COVID-19. Naomi comes back. She's bitter due to her losses. While out of the building, she was feeling, they may feel disconnected and lonely, as well as not wanting the responsibility. They need to feel their legs up under them again before they take the responsibility of looking after someone else. Some may be like Orpha, will not return to the building. They may not even return to church. They may or may not be a member. Some will prefer to watch online or call in for Sunday school. Certainly you can look at Hump Day. And then others will be like Ruth, demonstrating a strong commitment to serving the Lord. They could be new members or returning members with a new commitment. But whether they are Naomi, Orpha, or Ruth, all are valuable to the body of Christ. See you next week.